Nonviolent communication. How many of you have actually studied or read about NVC? 1, 2. Okay. So Marshall Rosenberg's book or some other books, some summaries. Yeah. Okay. So nonviolent communication is not actually that new. NVC, nonviolent communication, plus GreenBlueRed. What happens with NVC is that it's essentially a language, a way of talking to mitigate the violence, the so-called violence in the conversation. Now, what happens with NVC is that it's very much about you and how you talk. What we're adding with the GreenBlueRed framework is how you can step back and analyze the conversation, not just from your perspective, but looking at other people and including groups, okay? So if we think of that, you know, you have person 1, person 2, and then you have the person 1, let's say the anchor is blue, so that's me, or us if you're talking about future ice, and green would be the other. Then the very first thing in a conflict is paying attention to what are the facts. In NVC, they call that observations. So what are you observing? Now, if you remember from the blue video, those of you who went through all the videos, in the blue video, we talked about how many senses we have. How many senses do we have? Not 5.
11.
Yeah, 11. So there's a lot of things you can observe with 11 senses. That includes all the other non-traditional senses like movement and acceleration, but also some degree of intuitiveness. So when you observe facts, you're filtering the facts. You're not actually being objective. You're observing what's happening, but there's still lost data. And so when you're looking at a situation that's conflictual, and in a second you will be doing that in pairs, looking at your own conflicts, starting from what you observe, I observe, and it's going to be different potentially from the other person's perspective, even though theoretically a fact could be what? What could be a fact? In a conflict, where do you start unpacking facts? Because people first talk about their feelings generally. When there's a conflict, they come and say, I'm feeling upset in some way, I'm feeling angry. But what's the fact that you can put on the table before, yes?
I heard you saying this and that.
So what people say, so what was said, generally it's in the past. The timing, when it was said, how long things happen, so timelines. It's a really good idea to doodle a timeline when you unpack a conflict, like draw it out, like what's happened when, what happened when, and what was measurable, what was recorded. Because generally we remember things quite incompletely, so if you don't record them, then it's really down to, do you remember the same thing as I do? And that is actually another conflict that can start right there. So remember that facts is not the same as interpretations. So you could have a fact that is ideally aligned with all parties. So in some conflict mediations, this could take you 2 hours to align on the facts, because some people have different elements to put on the table, and you might have to just spend some time going like, do we all agree that this was what was said, this what was agreed? So said plus agreed, obviously, you know, all the legal contracts that you sign with clients are part of that. We signed on this paper on that date is a fact. But what then happens is that we have a second layer, which is generally it's the feelings, and it's generally negative feelings, and it's my feelings and their feelings, or other people's feelings. And it generally is what you have as a result of those facts. So when this happened, I felt this negative emotion. I felt angry, I felt upset, I felt annoyed. And everybody's feelings can be quite different with the very same facts. So you might have fact that there was a delay on the project, there was a budget overrun, and for one it was just scary, and the other one it was disappointing, and for the other it's frustrating. Now, they might sound similar, but they're quite a different experience. So when you look at facts, then you move down to feelings. And this is where people often get lost, is that until the facts are aligned, there's really no point in talking about feelings. Because then it's just stirring the feelings, and nobody really likes stirring those negative feelings. It can be very uncomfortable. So number one, get the facts straight, aligned on the facts. Number two, get the feelings. And those are very personal, and no judgment. Remember yesterday when we talked about conflict fuels, things that help escalation or increase escalation chance? If you have a judgment of somebody's feeling, oh yeah, I understand you, you're legitimate in your feeling, is not welcome. Because those who don't hear that feel that their feeling is not okay. So it's usually the people who are not judged positively who then start to feel that, well, is it not okay that I feel angry? In some work cultures, anger is not welcome. So somebody crying might be more welcome than somebody angry, but no feelings are above or below any. No feelings should be judged, because if we start judging those who cry as more legitimate than those who shout, then we're judging the feelings. So this is really hard to do. This is the difficult bit, because when you're in a conflict, you'll generally have a personal preference. Most of us either prefer people who cry or who get angry. But it's not okay to judge, because then the person who is feeling judged is not going to want to move to the next stage, which is where the beginning of the resolution can come. So number 3, this is where it gets more interesting. Think of a feeling as a flag for something that is not noticed by the participant in the conflict. Under the feeling is a need that is unfulfilled. Under any negative feeling, you will dig and find that there is a need for something that hasn't been either formulated in their head or expressed to other people. So an example, budget overrun, feeling angry, the need is for more control over the decision making in the client side, if I remember yesterday's case in one of the groups. Or the need might be for more status and authority within the decision making of the process with the client. Could be that. But you always have a need that is unfulfilled, that is for each different party or each individual in the group, okay? And that's really what people are missing often, because it's not something we're trained to do. So most of the time, the visible part is the feelings, because that's where people cry, shout, get angry, and they start from, oh, there's a problem because I'm feeling bad. But your job is to crawl back up one step and get the facts right, and then very quickly get them through the feelings to the needs and go, okay, under that anger, what's the need? Under that sadness, what's the need? And once you've got these, and there might be several needs, and some of them are not realistic to fulfill at work, right? You know, you might have an ego issue of self-confidence with a trigger that's been ancient from your childhood. It might not be something that work colleagues can handle with you, but at least you know that that's a need, and that gives you the possibility of doing something about it, which gives you then the possibility of going to a request. What we call a conscious request is when you start formulating to the other party based on those needs, and encouraged by the negative feelings as a way of going through that, is you put a request on under what circumstances could we, if I think back to yesterday's case, be part of the decision making with you, dear client, and be earlier in the process so that we can give the best of what we have in Futurize to you and serve your project. That's a request. And now, of course, many people, when they start playing with requests, they make a lot of mistakes, which are, you know, they do things like take it or leave it. So it's like closed. Or they make it a punishment. Well, because you were budget overrun, we need to counter that by making a punishment, and you're going to pay a penalty fee. All of those are not okay, because what they do is that they imply that the other person was wrong. So there are criteria, which I'll share with you later, about what is an acceptable request. But once that request has been expressed, it's a negotiation. It doesn't happen generally in one go. You might have to make several requests and open your ears and negotiate. And that 5th process is negotiation. And so if we color code this, there is, in the facts, obviously they should be shared, so they should be green, but at first they come out usually as blue, as pieces of a puzzle. The feelings are very much individual, like my feelings, your feelings are very much one person. Then the needs are again about individuals, and then when you get to requests, we start to be, what in the periodic table we put it as orange, but let's simplify and say it's red. It becomes where you start talking about action down here, okay? And so in the overall picture, what you're actually doing is that you're going in circles. Generally, you're going through this process like a funnel, like a marketing funnel, and then you go down, and eventually you get to a negotiation, and it can take a while. You know, I remember one case we did back in 2016 in Futurize. It took us like 6.5 hours to go through that process. It was pretty tedious, but it worked. And then you get to a point where everybody walks away feeling heard, their needs are potentially fulfilled, they're at peace with their feelings, and there's no longer the blame game going on between the participants, and then they can start pulling their sleeves up and working on a solution that's a win-win solution. It's not a win-lose or punishment of either party. Okay? That's the ideal way of transforming a conflict in a nutshell. Thank you, Adam.